I've got my hot hide glue here. One of the reasons I'm using hot hide glue, apart from, you know, tradition, is when I took the guitar apart, it came apart really nicely, and if anyone else has to take the guitar apart in the future, I'd like to sort of return that favour. Now, I read on a sort of violin makers guild that if you water the glue down, you do get less strength, but what you get is more open time, which is what we need at this point. So I'm going to give that a real good mix up. I've kind of put some little pencil marks all around, and I'm going to start at this end here, then do the neck end, because what I can do actually is sort of bend the neck a little bit to sort of contort the body, and that will actually help me get it lined up longitudinally, and then hopefully that will kind of pull it transversely into the position where I need it. Before I do that though, I'm just going to write down what I did here and sign it. Let's make sure this is all nice and clean. That's all looking good. All right, so I guess we've got to just go for it. Alright, now let's quickly do this on here. Just gonna slap this on. Okay. I'm gonna work quicker. So the more clamps we get on, the more relaxed we can be, but at the moment we are definitely not in relaxed mode. So it's one of those classic, you think you have enough clamps and you really don't have enough clamps. Alright, this has been sitting overnight. I'm a little bit nervous about this, not because I doubt myself necessarily, but it was a real challenge to get this all done in time and sitting flat. So I guess the real test is how the binding looks. Now the binding wasn't perfect. This is kind of why I was reasonably okay with taking this back off in the first place. The back's now on, and I decided not to bind the back, and the reason for that was I wanted to string the guitar up and see how it sat, and you need the back for that because it essentially acts like a brace. You know, without that back there's nothing to stop the neck from bending forward other than the sides, which are, you know, very very weak. So I've noticed a bit of an issue that I kind of feared might be the case, which is that there's this real kick up here. So essentially, if you have the action anything less than 3 mil here, it will play fine there, but it chokes out on here because there's a really, I don't know if you can sort of like see it there, but there's a really noticeable kick up, and you sort of want it to be a kick down ideally. And it's all due to this sort of, you know, the arch here. Now, I could do a neck preset, but there's actually another way that I could do this, which is reasonably controversial, but I have my reasons for doing it. And that is to actually slip the block. And the reason for that is the back is already off, and I think that I can cosmetically do like hide that work easier than I can hide you know, taking the whole neck off, the extension, all of that sort of stuff. And so what I'm aiming for is flat or a little bit of a fall away here when it's strung up. So I've got this piece of wood here just so that it's not resting on the end of the fretboard. I measured the gap at the body joint, and then I'm also looking at the 19th fret. And so there's a 0.7 mil difference there, i.e. this kicks up 0.7 mil. So what we essentially want is to tilt the neck back so that under string tension, there's no deviation there at all. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to loosen the strings off, and I'm going to remeasure the sort of 19th fret here, and see how much of it, or like how much the neck actually sort of kicks back, you know, when the tension is relieved. And it may well be that it doesn't really move at all, in which case that's great, because it makes it a lot easier to sort of judge how much we need to sort of, you know, slip the block by. And of course it may, on the other hand, move significantly, in which case we're going to have to do a bit of calculation and compensate for that movement. Okay, so the string tension is now off. We're going to carefully rest this guy here. Yeah, that's moved slightly. Because normally when you're doing a fall away, you do 10 thousandths, which is 1/4 mil, and that compensates for that movement. And what we're seeing is exactly that amount. So essentially what we want is to set the neck so that we have about 1/4 millimeter or 10 thousandths of an inch fall away here. And then when we string it up, it will be straight. So that's what we want to do. These little Ziploc bags, I'm a bit obsessed with never throwing them away. They're super useful for keeping your strings together and sort of out the way. So we'll go back to about this corner here. So this was not for the faint-hearted. I've put this in my neck vise, and hopefully you can see that that straight edge is nice and flat all the way along, and then just right at the end there, this is just a 10 thousandth piece of metal that just slips under there. We could probably get away with doing less actually. Before I cut anything away, before I sort of cut this back so that the binding channel is all correct again, because obviously this is going to create a little bit of an overhang of this back, so I am going to have to snip a little bit of that back material off. But before any of that happens, we'll string it up again, we'll see how she plays, and if she plays terribly and I've made a terrible mistake, then I'll just pop this again, and we'll just put it back to how it actually, you know, naturally wants to be. Just want to get a load of glue right at this heel, especially since it's going to be under pressure. I think that's going to be really good. So we'll leave that to set for the night. Come back tomorrow, the glue would have set up, and we can test it out again, see where we get to, and hopefully that would have done the trick. Okay, so having reset the neck, sort of like, you know, slipped the block, if you can call that resetting the neck, which I still maintain was the appropriate approach to go. You know, it's a lot less invasive given the back was off anyway, and the binding most notably. It's a lot less invasive than, you know, actually removing the neck, dealing with the dovetail, all of that sort of stuff. So I've got it to the point where it's mostly flat. If I just put a straight edge on here, this is at tension, I don't know how easy this will be to see, but basically it's pretty flat. But if anything, there's still a bit of a kick up here. And the only way that I can sort of like completely avoid that with a neck reset is to tip it back even further, which definitely is an option. But look at how high this bridge is already. That is now sort of over an inch high. And realistically, anything more than that, you're going to run into sort of lots of difficulties anyway. You know, like the pickup is going to be a nightmare because it's got to be like really sort of jacked up. And we're already sort of at the limits with that one anyway. So I think basically we're as tipped back as we can be. But even with, this is, you know, a 2mm action, 6/64, I guess it is, something like that. 5 or 6/64. So basically your sort of standard arch top action. But when you fret it out, you know, it's just not very useful, and there's nothing more to give as well. Like if the player who buys this wants a you know, a nice low action, then it's impossible if they want to play you know, beyond the 12th fret really. So it sort of kills me to say this, but I think the only option is to get the frets off, because essentially what the issue is there's a bit of a relief here, and then there's a hump here, and then this sort of like still tips up a little bit more than we would like it to. So, you know, realistically what we need to do is just flatten this area out and sort of plane away a little bit of this board, just to sort of like maybe, you know, 0.5 millimeter would do it, which we obviously can't do with the frets in place. And there's absolutely nothing left to give on the frets. They are, you know, at 25 thousandths as we speak, so 0.5 mil high, thereabouts. So yeah, I was really reluctant to do this, especially seeing as they are the original frets. But, you know, then the other part of me thinks, is the person who buys this guitar going to be the sort of player that is concerned about original frets, given that the back has been off, it's missing its pick guard, it's had the both braces repaired or replaced, more to the point, it's had pickups retrofitted, it's had holes patched in it, you know, it's got a jack in the side of, you know, of the body. It's a player's grade guitar, so let's make it a player's guitar and replace the frets, get it playing really amazingly, and you know, and champion that, you know, originality. The ship has sailed, and if we try and keep it original, it's just going to be non-original and play horribly, which isn't helping anyone. So it was a slightly heartbreaking decision, because, you know, I want to get this thing done and out the door, but I want it to also be really good, and it's just not at the moment. And what I'm also going to do is take the nut out. I don't believe this is the original nut, and actually the binding is coming away here. I don't know if you can see that moving, but it's sort of doing it on the other side as well. Yes, I don't believe this is the original nut, but what we'll do anyway is score behind here, score along here, score along there, and just knock that out. And the reason that we're doing that is because it will make it a lot easier to get a really nice run with the leveling beam. So, scrap of wood, and we just knock it like that, give it a few good taps, and that should, there we go. So there was a little bit of glue underneath, a lot of glue underneath actually. This is totally unnecessary. Okay, frets are all out, nut is out, and the board, believe it or not, is straight. We've tightened the truss rod actually quite a lot, and so this bit of the board is really straight. But what you'll see, hopefully there, is that there's still light coming through, and the reason for that is we've still got a kick up here. So what we're going to do is we're just going to sort of plane the board flat first of all. What I've actually found is, I found this on SGs, if you support the neck at one end and then plane, what happens is the action of you planing actually sort of pushes the board, the neck upwards a bit like that, and so naturally you actually plane in a fall away here anyway. Yes, arguably is poor technique because you're essentially planing or leveling in such a way that is unsupported, but it sort of kind of almost does the same job as putting tension on the guitar. But what we're also going to do is, I've got one of the Sumac understring leveling beams, and what we'll do is we'll get string tension in there and then do some more leveling, so it's actually all based on the realities of what's going to happen. In theory, this would be 12 inches. It's about 12. You know, it's not going to be perfect, but that is actually not far off. So we've got 120 grit on the block here. Here's what's interesting. It's coming off here and here. So the neck is actually slightly twisted. It's slight, but incidentally, what I did do is I've got a little bit of a bow in the neck by design, and it's just basically to give us a little bit more. I might take a little bit of that out, but it's just to give us a little bit more possibility of relief from that truss rod, because I was finding that even when it was like fully cranked, even when it was fully cranked, there was still a real relief in there. So what I'm doing is I'm sort of like planing it flat with some relief, and then when we tighten the truss rod, we'll have the ability to have more back bow if necessary. You can see here, incidentally, where the classic gentleman with the long fingernails has been. Just cut them. Cut the fingernails on the left hand. Alright, so you can see that we have smoothed that board down. There are some areas here that we haven't quite got, and obviously these little marks here. We're not looking to make this board perfect. In fact, I think it would be not true to the guitar to make it completely perfect. All we're looking to do is make sure that where the frets are gonna seat is completely level, and we know that now because all of these areas where the frets are actually gonna sit are nice and level. We've got a really good amount of nice material there. Awesome, awesome, awesome. That is going to be beautiful. When I've been adjusting the neck on the Gibson, it sort of felt like I could sort of tighten it, but it didn't do a huge amount, and I could loosen it, but it didn't really do a huge amount. And the nut was turning, but I actually think what was happening is at some point it's been so over tightened, possibly even to sort of like try and lower the action or something like that, but it's bent the washer here. That's actually like I've since kind of straightened it and tightened it up, but it keeps rebending, and the reason for that is all the fibers through here are really crushed. And what I want to do is to basically get something for it to seat on, basically some new wood in there. And the reason for that is this is just going to keep on crushing, and I feel that when it sort of bends and crushes like that, it's going to keep pinching this thread here, which will impede the truss rod. So I think for sort of optimal truss rod functionality, we need for there to be a sort of a flat surface for this washer to seat on. So first things first, we'll just give this a bit of a tap. It doesn't take a huge amount. I think this is like mild steel or something. That is probably close enough. Okay, so the next thing that we'll do is we'll trace around this. And the easiest thing for me to do is actually cut this out with a bandsaw, shape it, and then cut it. I'm going to put this knot on here, and I'm not for the moment going to glue this. I've just put a little bit of paste wax on the threads there just to make them go really nicely. And the reason I'm not going to glue this bit of wood is because there is a chance that I'll need to lop a load off it, and it's going to be much easier when it's not in situ. But what I want to do is basically crush it into shape, just so that it conforms to the existing timber underneath. So what you can hopefully see there is this little bit here is in line now with these cheeks, so we just need to get rid of these outside bits, and that is exactly what our intention was. Okay, I've just given that a bit of a sand, and I actually impregnated it with some super glue as well, just to try and strengthen it up a little bit. And I'm just going to flatten this washer again. Now that we've done that, when we tighten the truss rod, I would expect it not to crush the washer, but we will see in about 30 seconds whether that is the case or not. This nut, unfortunately, has been really mangled up by previous owners. So it is crushing in a little bit, but that looks pretty good to me. Just occasionally you buy a tool that makes you question why it's taking you so long to realise how amazing they are. And in this instance, it's the little fret routing bits for a Dremel, fret slot routing bits. They are awesome. So we're just radiusing the wire. This is a 12-inch under saddle or understring radius. And you see we're just going slightly over, because essentially what we want is for, you know, when you press the center of the fret in, it kind of like pushes down the outside of the frets, particularly given that the last like couple of mil of each, or the outside couple of mil of each fret on both sides is not actually going to have a tang, because it's going to be over the binding. So as you can see, I've already got my first fret in. I just wanted to try something off camera, and what I wanted to try was a little technique that I actually learned from the great Ken Parker in his really lovely arch toppery series. And that trick is as follows. What we're going to do is we're just going to cut this fret down to size, and we're going to just nip the ends off it, because these frets are obviously, we need the tangs not to go all the way to the end, because we've got binding. You can see here that if I line the fret up, like the tang is a fraction narrower than the fretboard, which is exactly what we're after. Now, the trick that Ken uses, which is really cool, is what you can see, hopefully, on the bottom of this tang. It's not quite perfect. You know, the tool that nips the tang off does a pretty good job, but it does leave just a little ridge there, which you'll definitely see over the side of the binding. So I'm just drawing a little line with a Sharpie there and there. And so what I'm looking at there is the material that I want to keep. And in the middle is the section that I don't. And now what we've done, which looks quite lethal, and it probably is got a cut-off wheel and taken 3 notches out of it. And the reason for that is it allows us to see through this cut-off wheel while we're actually working. And what we're going to be doing is putting the fret in here and just using the cut-off wheel to grind and sort of hollow out that little bit there, and make us a nice smooth surface. And the reason that I put the black line on there is so it allows me to much better see actually what's going on. So if I turn this on, you know, you can actually see from where it's cutting how square you are. And we just want to have it like that basically. So we kind of remove all of the tang. Just like that. Super quick. I've now got the guitar tuned up to F sharp. And the reason for that is because we currently have gauge 11 strings on here, and I want to simulate the tension of gauge 12 strings, and I used a little online calculator courtesy of Stringjoy, and this is what they've provided basically. You know, like you can put in the pitch that the guitar is tuned at and the gauge of each string, and it gives you the equivalent tension basically. So the reason why I want to do all of that is because there's just a little sort of choke out sort of buzz thing happening around here. The reason for that is next to funny non-linear things when under tension, and this is why Dan Erlewine created his jig, which, you know, I'd love to have. I just don't have the space or the means to purchase one. They are on the expensive side, and the closest thing that I can do is get one of these Stumac under fret bar sort of straight edges or whatever they call them, put the guitar under tension and then sand. So I've marked all of my strings, all of my frets. I've put you know, Sharpie on each of them, and we literally just do this thing basically. This really has been one of those projects where you continually doubt yourself. We've refretted, we've made sure that the frets are all really flat under tension, so everything should be good, and it's perfect on these outside frets. But when you get to the middle, it's choking out, and I was trying to work out why that was. You know, I was looking at the action, maybe it had some frets that weren't quite stuck down or something like that. And then I had a hunch. So 12-inch undersaddle radius gauge, you can use them on top of the saddle as well. And you know when the radius is right when you can gently put this on your strings and they all choke out, okay? So that's what we should be hearing. That's doing a slight sitar thing, which means it's not complete contact, but listen. So these 3 strings are completely out of contact. Then I tried a 17, and that was basically the same deal. And even when I go over to a 20-inch radius, so that's actually a good thing, because what it tells us is we just need to do some filing here at the saddle and get that radius happening basically. So the first thing I'm doing is just making sure that actually the string spacing is looking good, and using Stumac's string string spacing calculator, we're looking pretty good. The only one that could come over slightly is this B string here, but basically that's bang on. I might even just bring that over slightly. Anyway, you can actually see it. All right, so B needs attention. So working on the basis that the outside strings need to come down first, because obviously, even though they're at correct height, these ones are sitting too low. So we need to lower the outside strings, and we will start with the bass E. So you can hear that's getting there now. We were getting more buzzing on here, like a sitar sound, than this string, which means that we're resting more on this string now, so but still ringing out clear there. So if we just get a nut file and do the same with this one, I'm just going to do a tiny adjustment there. Just take a little bit more off there, and slightly less off there. So that is much better, definitely. One of the things I'd really like to do, I sort of checked the nut height here, or at least the sort of height of the strings at the nut, and they're all pretty good, but this is very, very high, this nut. So you can see there how deep those slots are, and I'd like to sort of file them back so that they are sort of just under the height of the strings. You know, the string is like sitting slightly proud from there, particularly on like the 6th, 5th, 4th strings. You know, the top E is sort of okay, but we'll give it a go anyway. But this nut is binding really badly as well. So let's remove that excess material, and then what we're going to do is get the strings back on there and just give it a bit of love. I like to just use this Crimson Guitars fret file. It's a sort of fret end file. It's just a really nice sized file, and it's nicely crafted. Yeah, it does a really good job on getting the nut, and when you're doing it in place, you know, the rounded edges here work really nicely to sort of protect your workpiece. And then we'll just relieve this back, because the more material that there is at the back, the more there is for the string to bind on. And what we're actually going to do is sort of like widen out the back of the slots anyway, because they're actually, that's where they're binding at the moment. But yeah, if we just have a nice sort of rounded back to the nut, it will make that job a whole lot easier. Just a medium 3M pad. So we're not taking the sort of lip or the slot off here. We're rounding over the sort of front edge of the nut that doesn't actually touch anything other than your hand. Hence wanting to just take that edge off a little bit. So 400 grit now. And just once again put a little bit of my favourite compound, the Scratch X. So already that's looking better, and that's before we've even cut our nut slots properly. So this is all looking really nice. The one thing that we do need to address though is this nut. The slots are now a real good depth, but we do need to make some adjustments because they are a little bit on the high side and the slots are binding. So what we do is we sort of just have a look at where the string is going. So, you know, for example, with this string here, you can see that it's kicking off to this side. So actually where it's going to bind is right on this corner here, and that's what we need to sort of relieve. So essentially where we want the only sort of like pinch point or pivot point to be is right at the front here, and the rest of it should be all sort of like supported but not pinching. So let's start with this E string. This is almost a straight pull, maybe slightly kinked that way, but we need to actually sort of come down with this one. And I don't quite have the right size nut file, so what I'm going to do is just kick it to the right and to the left slightly, and just make sure that we're making a nice slot that it sits firmly in. Like the amount of times in my, you know, learning years, or the amount of times in the past that I've sort of you know, cut nut slots too deep because I thought they weren't deep enough, but actually what was happening was the string wasn't sitting, you know, properly in the slot, and then when you make it sit properly, it's too low. That height is perfect. Yeah, that generally is nice. So yeah, what we're going to do is just flare out towards this way, and we're just pointing towards the string post. That is gliding beautifully in the nut. It just needs to come down a little bit. That's lovely. From this point onwards, the slots are actually quite a good depth, so we need to be really mindful about not taking off too much there. They could come down a little bit, but actually the issue with this one is not the depth, but the fact that it's going straight, whereas the string is trying to bind off to that way. So what we need to do is just relieve that back a bit. And I've put a pencil line in here, partly so that you can see where I'm cutting. You can see that pencil line is still fully intact, even though I've been hacking away. So it's partly so you can see, but also, you know, partly so I can see. I also find that if the file is binding, your string is going to bind. You know, it's really just the last few strokes where you want just the width of the file. Depth-wise, that is perfect. We just need to flare it out a little bit more here. Just relieve that back. Again, we're just not touching the front of this at all, because that's actually perfect. Need to be really mindful with this one because it's actually the perfect height. I don't know if you heard that click there. That is the sign of a string binding on your nut, and it's not a good sign. It's not the end of the world, but what it tells you is that you need to do a bit more work on that nut. So again, what we're going to do is just put a line in here, just so I can see where I've cut, particularly at the front, because I do not want to take material off the bottom of this slot. Now, I haven't touched this slot so far, and I think it needs to be filled a little bit, because I think the bottom of the slot is actually lower than where we need it to be. It's just it's really badly cut. Yeah, that's way low. All right, bummer. All right, that's okay. We'll move on from that one. This one's okay, and this one is okay. All right, so this is the telltale sign again. You can hear it binding in that slot. So let's go 16, where are we? Here. Again, we're just gonna relieve the back and this corner here. So, repairing. We want to get tape under here, so the easiest way to do that is just stick it onto a fret file. Learnt this from the man Dan Erlewine. Then we're going to get some dust, so I'm just going to get a little fragment of bone that's just an offcut from a nut that I previously cut. We're going to sand it and make a nice dust with it, and then just fill that slot with the dust and put some CA glue in there. And we'll just pat it down into the slot with this 13 file. Now the next thing that is crucial to this is, rather than risking everything and ruining everything by squeezing some glue on here, we're just going to use this beautiful glue looper from StewMac, which lets us be really targeted with our glue without the risk, or with far less risk at least, of it slopping everywhere all over the guitar. And once we've done that, we just stick a bit more of this guy on here. And I'm not going to use activator, because activator is an absolute nightmare if it gets on the finish, especially old nitro finish. So we just let that set up, and now we can just tackle this guy here, because it should be pretty good by now. But you can tell by the way that the file feels. You know, you can tell whether you're sanding something like super hard or whether it's still just a little bit gummy. I mean, that's almost done. I'm just going to flare this end out. The next job, given that we've slipped the heel, is we've got a bit of an overhang here because the sides have basically gone inwards. So there's like a lip now on this back that we need to bring in line with the sides. So we just carefully chisel this all away. So this bit, obviously we couldn't get the chisels behind, but I think the way that we'll approach it is, this is actually very straight, this heel. And so I think we just like draw a line here with a knife. And we just sort of work it down. Alright, so binding, this is the top. So let's get our paintbrush. And we'll just put a little bit of glue in here. So we'll start by going up to this corner, but why don't we work backwards from it? it's always hard with projects like this, you know, to know where to hold it and where to fold it. And in this particular instance, you can actually still slightly see it here, but there's like these pigtails that you normally associate with orbital sanding, and they were certainly not from me because I didn't do any orbital sanding around here. But basically, when trying to sand that through, because this finish is so sort of like old and thin, what happened is I ended up sort of sanding through on this little bit, which is obviously extremely upsetting, and, you know, quiet words were had with myself. But at the same time, there's a very big and very noticeable difference between bashes and dings and stuff from years of playing and power tool marks, right? And that's what sort of bothered me about it. It very much looked like a power tool mark. So we are where we are. So what I'm going to do is I've just mixed up like a sort of tobacco and vintage amber sort of mix, and we're just going to shoot that this way because we don't want to sort of encroach in here. It's a very difficult place because it's right in the blend here, but you know, if we bring this blend back a little bit this way, I don't think it's going to be a major issue. What I like to do is just like, you just get it so that you can see exactly where you're shooting, and you shoot really, really lightly, and it helps you aim. So I can see that I'm shooting slightly above where I need to be there. So if I just bring this up here, it's quite dark, this solution, but there's definitely a translucence to it. And initially I was like, maybe I'll go darker, but actually it just make work for yourself. You know, it'll be quicker, but it'll be harder to blend in. There's another bit here, full disclosure, this was actually me, this one. When I was putting the frets in, I was using CA glue with activator, but when doing so, I dripped some and it just eats paint immediately, which is very upsetting. All right, so let's try this one. If you mask hard edges, you will get them coming through really, really noticeably. Whereas if you use a nice little soft fold over, you kind of get this blend in. You see how, like, by having a sort of a really light translucent mix, it just helps you immeasurably to blend this stuff in. And what I might do is just open this fan up a little bit. I'm not too worried about this bit because it's going to be covered, so what I'm just going to do is just like do a little blend between these two areas. Just to sort of soften the lines of where I've been. Awesome. Alright, I think I'll leave that, so let's peel this off. I think that's going to be just fine. Peel that masking tape off. We do have a little bit of cleanup to do there, but we can live with that. I'll just leave that to dry, and then I'll just sort of scrape it off slightly, or even maybe even sand. But generally I'm super happy with it, and then we just sort of hit that with some clear just to sort of seal it all in, and we'll be in a really good place. So what we're going to do is just scrape off this bit here. The way that I like to do it is essentially just like hold this razor like that, and then your thumb and finger sort of acts as like a depth stop, and it really controls how far in the razor blade goes. And then you just have to look at the angle and sort of really carefully see where you're scraping. So you can see I'm scraping right on the inner edge there, which tells me that, you know, I certainly don't want to tip any further forward. Okay, I think that's good. And then I'll just get a little bit of sandpaper and just neaten it up. Just one or two little passes here. So then it's just a case of spraying some clear on here, which will, you know, do two things. It will sort of seal it, but it will also sort of blend all of this into the existing paint. We've now put sort of about 3 coats of clear plus obviously the kind of colour or tint coats at least on this one, and it's sort of arguably harder than doing a sort of a fresh new finish, because what we want is this lovely thing. I don't know if you can see it there. There. What we want is this lovely effect where the lacquer actually sort of is sinking into the grain, and as soon as we make it all flat, it's going to stick out like a sore thumb. So we've got some nice bits there. It is actually sort of sinking in because I didn't level any of this before spraying the coats on. But what I'm going to do is just go straight in with 2000 grit, just take off that sort of like overspray kind of look, and then polish by hand. And not only will that make the job much quicker and reduce the risk of me sort of burning through anything, but it will actually also give a much closer finish to what's on here. This is just a solution of water and a little bit of dish soap just to sort of lube it a little bit. We want to minimize where we're going with this one. You know, I don't want to give myself a load of work, but we also want to make sure that we sand off any sort of overspray or anywhere where we've been essentially. All right, so a little bit more overspray to be dealing with kind of in this area. This area is actually looking pretty good, probably a bit more work required there. That's fine. Yeah, we are very, very close to this being done. Right, that's looking nice. We'll now just pull this back up very carefully so we don't drop it. We'll put this puck on, and we'll put this guy on. Beautiful.
Yeah.